The following is an excerpt from the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department evidence log, dated January 14th. Item 42B. 1 serrated drywall saw, 1 flashlight, and a stack of 312 Polaroid photographs recovered from the interior wall cavity of the master bedroom.
I remember the exact moment the blade bit into the gypsum. I was just trying to find a draft. A reason why my house felt like a meat locker despite the furnace kicking on every 10 minutes. The drywall gave way with a gritty protest, and I reached my hand into the dark void between the studs, expecting to feel handfuls of pink fiberglass insulation. Instead, my fingers brushed against something slick and stiff. I pulled out a single Polaroid. My heart didn't just skip a beat. It stopped. The photo was a high-angle shot of me, passed out in my bed, taken from directly above my pillow. I was wearing the same grey t-shirt I had worn our very first night in the house.
It had seemed like the ultimate suburban win. A 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet Ohio cul-de-sac for 40% below market value. The previous owner, an elderly man named Mr. Henderson, had lived there for 40 years and eventually passed away in the living room. Since he had no surviving kin, the state put it up for auction.
My wife, Sarah, and I didn't care about the history. We just saw a chance to give our son, Leo, a yard and a decent school district. But as the first major snowstorm of December buried the driveway under 2 feet of powder, the dream started to feel more like a refrigerator. I had spent the whole morning checking the vents and the thermostat. The air coming out of the registers was a solid 100 degrees, but the room stayed at a crisp 55. I figured the insulation in this old place had finally settled or rotted away. I grabbed my tool belt and headed to the hallway, determined to cut a few pilot holes to see what we were dealing with. Sarah, I am going to open up the wall in the hall. If there is no batting in there, that explains why we are freezing our tails off.
Just try not to make too much of a mess. Okay, I just got Leo down for a nap.
I made the first cut about 6 feet up the wall. When I reached in, a literal waterfall of glossy squares began to spill out of the opening, sliding down the wall and scattering across the hardwood floor. I dropped the saw. Thousands of them. I knelt down and started flipping through the piles. They weren't just random pictures. Every single one depicted a person in deep sleep. Some were curled in blankets. Others were sprawled out. But the perspective never changed. Every shot was taken from a bird's eye view, looking straight down at the bed. As I fanned them out, the true scale of the obsession became clear. These were organized. Each stack was rubber banded and labeled with a year in permanent marker. 1984, 1991, 2005. I saw a young woman from the mid-90s. Her hair fanned out on a pillow I recognized as being in the guest room. I saw a middle-aged man from the 80s. The further back I went, the more the wallpaper in the background of the photos changed. matching the layers I had stripped off during our renovations. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. This wasn't a collection of strangers from some far-off place. This was a chronological record of every soul who had ever closed their eyes in this house over the last 4 decades. And the angle. It was impossible. There were no cameras on our ceilings. Yet, the lens had been less than 3 feet away from my face while I slept. I heard Sarah's footsteps behind me, then the sharp intake of breath as she saw the sea of Polaroids covering the floor. She picked up a handful from a stack labeled 2012. Her face went pale, her thumb trembling as she traced the image of a teenage girl sleeping under a heavy quilt.
Jonathan, this is the Miller girl. From 2 towns over. She went missing over a decade ago. They found her bike by the creek, but they never found her.
I grabbed another pile, my heart hammering against my ribs. There was a man from 2015, a local mail carrier who had vanished during a heat wave. Then another. These weren't just creepy photos. This was a trophy room, a systematic archive of every cold case in the county, all tied to the 4 walls of our home. We need to leave. Now. Get Leo and pack a bag for a couple of nights. I am calling 911. I pulled out my phone, but the signal bar was a hollow triangle. I looked out the window. The sky had turned a bruised purple, and the wind was whipping the snow into a frantic white wall. We were 5 miles from the main road, and the driveway was already buried under 3 feet of fresh powder. Our old SUV wouldn't make it 10 yards. We were trapped in a house stuffed with the evidence of 40 years of disappearances. I went back to the hole I had cut, desperate for some kind of logic. I picked up the most recent photo, the one of me. I looked at the digital timestamp in the bottom right corner. December 22nd, 3:14 a.m. My blood ran cold. That was 2 nights ago. Sarah and Leo had gone to her mother's for the day, and I had stayed behind to finish the flooring. I remembered that night vividly. I had been paranoid about the neighborhood and had double-checked every deadbolt and window lock myself. I was the only person in the house, or so I had thought. I looked up at the ceiling of the master bedroom. There were no hidden cameras, no pinholes in the plaster. But then I saw it. The recessed lighting fixture. The angle of the photo was a perfect match for the gap between the bulb and the trim. The same went for the air conditioning vents and the smoke detectors. Every photo had been snapped from a vantage point inside the structure itself. I grabbed my measuring tape. I needed to do something to keep my hands from shaking. I measured the interior wall of the living room, 15 feet. Then, I threw on my parka, stepped out into the freezing wind, and measured the exterior of the same wall. Sarah, get the flashlight.
What is it? What is wrong?
The math doesn't work. The outside of this house is nearly 5 feet wider than the inside, all the way around. Every room was encased in a secondary shell. There wasn't just a gap between the studs for insulation. There was a void large enough for a person to move through. We weren't just living in a house. We were living inside a giant camera, and someone was still sitting in the operator's seat. We moved our mattresses into the living room, trying to stay away from the outer walls. The blizzard was screaming outside, shaking the window frames, but the house remained eerily silent. Then, I heard it. It wasn't a footstep or a breath. It was a rhythmic, dry friction coming from the wall behind the television. The sound of stiff paper sliding against paper. Someone was shuffling a deck of photos. Someone was filing away the pictures they had taken of us while we sat there, terrified. "Sarah, take Leo into the bathroom. Lock the door and do not come out until I tell you." I didn't wait for her to move. I ran to the garage and grabbed my splitting maul. My vision was tunneling. I went back to the living room wall where the shuffling sound was loudest and swung the axe with everything I had. The blade bit through the drywall, but instead of hitting a wooden stud, it punched into a void. I tore a jagged 3-foot hole in the wall and shone my flashlight inside.
Behind the drywall was a narrow passage, barely 2 feet wide. The floor was covered in heavy gray felt to muffle footsteps. Copper wires ran along the ceiling like veins, feeding into pinhole cameras mounted behind every vent and light fixture.
I squeezed into the gap, the smell of stale air and old grease hitting me instantly. I followed the crawl space as it curved around the kitchen. In the corner, I found a small alcove. There was a camping stove, a gallon of water, and a makeshift bed. Beside it sat a stack of high-end camera equipment and a heavy ledger. I opened it. It was a logbook. The last entry was dated today, just 10 minutes ago. It read, "The father is becoming agitated. I need more film for the bedroom." The realization was a cold blade in my chest. Mr. Henderson had not died. The death in the living room had been a staged performance for the paramedics. A way to legally cease to exist so he could become a permanent ghost in the machine. He had never left. He had been watching us eat, sleep, and breathe from 18 inches away. "Sarah, we are leaving. Now." I grabbed Leo and Sarah, and we ran for the front door. We didn't even grab our coats. We plunged into the waist-deep snow, the wind hitting us like a physical wall. We struggled toward the road, our lungs burning in the sub-zero air. I looked back at the house one last time, expecting to see a dark, empty silhouette. Instead, every single window in the house strobed white. A synchronized flash from every room, every vent, and every corner. He was taking a final, panoramic shot of our escape.
We spent the next month in a state-protected hotel 3 states away, while the Federal Bureau of Investigation tore the Ohio house apart. They found 3 miles of hidden passages and the remains of 4 people under the floorboards. But Henderson was gone. He had vanished through a tunnel that led to the storm drains before the police arrived.
I thought we were safe. I thought the nightmare ended when we crossed the state line. But this morning, the hotel clerk handed me a plain manila envelope that had been dropped in the overnight slot. There was no return address. I opened it at the breakfast table, my hand shaking. Inside was a single, glossy Polaroid. It was a high-angle shot of me, Sarah, and Leo, sleeping in our hotel beds. The timestamp in the corner read, January 5th, 3:14 a.m.
Thank you for listening to this story until the very end. It really means a lot to the channel. Tell me, what would you do if you found out your home had a secondary set of walls? If you enjoyed this journey into the dark, please hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss our next upload. Stay safe, stay alert, and remember to check your vents tonight. Make sure to watch our other videos for more true horror. This was an original story written exclusively for this channel. Until next time.